Today is Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. It's a regular meeting of the Harbor Advisory Board, and we will start off with a quorum, or call to order quorum. I'll make you read it off. Sorry, Lori. I just like it.
Member O'Brien.
Present.
Member Witkowski.
Present.
Member Vale. Member Green. Member Dowdy.
Here.
Member Hanson.
Here.
Chair Myers.
Here, thank you.
You have a quorum.
Thanks. With that, we'll go to the next item, and we will have a moment of silence. All right. Jean, Member Dowdy, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
The flag of the United States of America. Republic for which it stands, one nation.
All right, thank you. Next up is we'll go through the member announcements. We'll go ahead and start with Member Witkowski.
Only announcement for me is we're starting to close on the end of the summer for local schools, and first day of school will be August 17th. So sad day, still exciting, junior lifeguards and things happening around, but looking forward to that transition.
All right, thank you. Next, I'll go to Member Vale.
She has all the information from the waterfront and from the museum to discuss, and so I'll leave it to her.
All right, thank you. I'll go over to Member Dowdy.
Yes, we're starting to see some life in the bay, some little anchovies. They're coming late this year. Normally we see them in June or July, but we're just starting to see some little finger anchovies showing up. I've been inspecting a lot of moorings lately, and on the mooring chains themselves, lots and lots of growth. So that's all a good sign. So,
Thank you. Member O'Brien.
Yeah, there's all of the normal fishing for this time of year is taking place currently. Not all of it normally. Rock cod. The guys are fishing rock cod, black cod. And unfortunately, the crab fishery was shut down early this year. I've mentioned that before, and there is no salmon fishing this year. So there's a lot of very hungry fishermen and crew on the coast, and that's all the way up the entire west coast of the United States. Also, I'd like to mention, and I think other people will probably mention it, I hope, that this week, starting on the 11th, there'll be the San Salvador will be visiting us, and the museum is looking forward to showing it off. It'll be down on the pier naturally, but the museum will be selling tickets for those of you who haven't bought them already. And please go down and visit the museum whenever you get an opportunity. Thank you.
Jeremiah, how are the albacore guys doing?
Albacore is doing really poorly this year, not because of the stocks. The stocks are there, and the boats that are fishing them are doing very well. There's no market. So up north, unfortunately, all of our processors and buyers are not buying. They've got fish left over from last year, was a bumper crop. They've got fish left over. The cold storage facilities are full. There's trouble getting freezer trucks to go to the docks because a lot of our fish get shipped up there. So it's a really, really tough season for all
some of the sport guys down south out of San Diego are picking up some albacore. So that's good news for us.
Yeah, the sport guys are doing fine. There's no problem there. It's just can't sell one today, so. That's it.
All right, thank you. Member Hanson?
All right, thank you. I want to start with the announcements from the Chamber of Morro Bay. They have a breakfast on the bay that's happening on August 16th from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. They're covering media and journalism in our area, and it's I go to them. They're very informative, and it's just a really good turnout. You get breakfast and a lot of great speakers. They also have the Shop Sip and Stroll that's going to happen on September 14th for the Embarcadero, and there's going to be a record number of businesses that are partaking in that. And then for a free event that the Chamber is doing, which is a local mixer at Flippo's on August 9th from 5:30 p.m. to 7. And they have a ton of different things like arcade games and batting cages that everybody can take part in. Another thing that I did that I just wanted to share today is that I went to the abalone farm and took a tour. It was put on by the SLO Chamber, and I got a good idea of what is next for that particular property. What was it, 300 acres? But 20 acres are just for the aquaculture area. And what their hope is to do is to create an aquaculture farm for multiple different farmers to use and use a zero footprint or as close to they possibly can to it. So they can, right now they're doing algae and they're being pretty successful. So we wish them good luck. It's a nonprofit, and the leaders of those, one is a Cal Poly professor of ocean ecology. So it seems like a really exciting thing, and I'll leave this little pamphlet down on the back. It's harmonycoast.org. And they're taking donations as well as applications for volunteers. It's a beautiful area to go out and visit. I enjoyed it.
Most of my interesting stuff is going to be covered with both being a docent for the San Salvador, and then we went on the albacore or abalone farm. It's pretty interesting to see that farm that's been in business for 50 years, that's been out of business now for 5, so it has a ghost town feel to it, but it is going to go back into service, hopefully. So it's pretty cool. With that, next up is we have a presentation about the San Salvador. Judy, if you wouldn't mind coming up. She's part of the Maritime Museum who sponsors that, and we've been hearing about it for several months, so we're excited to hear a little bit more. Judy, if you would mind introducing yourself.
Thank you for inviting me tonight. I'm Judy Salamanca. I serve on the board of directors for the Maritime Museum with Chris and with Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a past vice president of the board, and Chris and I share dual vice presidents, but in different areas. He takes care of the operations in the fleet, and I'm supposed to be doing development. The San Salvador is part of the development. I was originally on the board of directors when we cited the building, and I'll go over that. What I'd like to share with you tonight is some historical, because that's where I come from and why I came back on the board, because of the San Salvador. And it sounds like we have then, with the Q&A with the three of you involved in it, then we can go into the docking, where all of that with the volunteers. That's exciting. And Chris, what is happening in our future? So help me out with this. So we'll start with the presentation. I just pulled from my archives several of the photographs that I had through the years, and that's what I'll share with you this evening. Of course, first of all, is the San Salvador is coming the 11th through the 20th. The cost is minimal. to our guests, and it's either, you know, $10, $12, or $8 for children. It's something the entire family can easily do. Our sales, I don't have a number. I didn't get the number of what our sales are at right now, but in the last 2 weeks, they've really started picking up. It was a little slow during the fair. We expected that, and we anticipated that after the fair, it would pick up, and it certainly has. I wanted to share this slide because this was the opening of when it came in 2016. The San Diego Maritime Museum, as we found out at the docent training, which, by the way, there were 60 people there. I was humbled, and it was just wonderful to have that many people. But when they arrived in 2016, which was in October rather than in the summertime, there were people that were lining the banks. We had one of our foggy mornings. They came in early in the morning. I think it was early by around 8:30 or something like that. And you see the San Salvador arriving, and we had several of our vessels that would go out and meet them. Plus, we had developed a strong relationship with the Solinans, and they made 3 Thule boats for us. One afterwards they gave to San Diego to take home. Actually, I think they took it down to them. And one is at the museum, and one they still have. Handcrafted and done specifically for this time. And what this was this is what they, in 1542, if the San Salvador happened to have come into our area, there's no citing that, or anywhere in any kind of history book that they actually came on land at Morro Bay. But if they were to encounter them, they would have encountered them with the going in the Thule boats. I wanted to, because it's historical, because our fourth graders, fifth graders study Juan Cabrillo in school. As soon as we knew it was coming in, we came up with a program that, unfortunately, school was just getting out, and it's summertime, but this program went out to all of the teachers in Del Mar and in Los Osos, to the elementary school there, and also to the libraries. So the kids are encouraged to come out, do a treasure hunt, and find out some questions, and their teachers are going to be prepared to give them a pat on the back or something for going out and visiting. I wanted to flash back that I'm sure everybody knows this, but maybe they don't. I mean, if they're new. But the Maritime Museum, once the San Salvador came in to Morro Bay in 2016, it is the only tall ship. It's a galleon rather than a tall ship, but people know it as tall ship. It is the only visitor of the tall ship breed that shares revenue. When they were in here before, they were on a major grant from the state, and they were visiting ports all along the way. And at the time, Larry Newland, who is holding up our logo, had been about 20 years, had been hoping, wishing, trying to raise money in order to site a maritime museum somewhere on the Central Coast. At the time, the city manager was Mr. David Buckingham. And at the Maritime Museum, we have to give him at least a few kudos, because he wanted to get the submarine, the DSRV, out of the parking lot because we needed more parking there. And he was adamant to find out how to do that. And he decided that it should go over in the Triangle lot. And that was the first birthing of a maritime museum and siting it here. And we brought over the Alma and also the Coast Guard boat. And if you haven't been down there lately, what happened during 2020 was absolutely amazing. The board of directors then just moved together and did an absolutely wonderful job. Not only are the vessels there, but also there was a patio created with an iconic fishing boat. And the patio has allowed us to be able to have presentations with the Navy, to do celebrations, to bring in community groups, to have meetings, to do a lot of things there that we never would have been able to do before. You can see there's the patio area and some of the things that during 2020 they were able to accomplish. The telling the abalone story of we have the video, and Scott Mather and Lori Mather created that. It was shown twice at the Bay Theater, sold out both times. People want to hear those stories, did wonderful things. The bell comes from Dave Thomas, and it was something that his dad had rescued or somehow had. I'm not sure I know the whole story. And then also during 2020, there was a grant that was available from the city. And the board, I keep saying they because I was not on the board at the time. They applied for the grant to do a kids cove, so that now when the kids come, there is something for them to do, and their parents are just amazed that they keep the kids busy while they can look at inside and around and at all of the rest of the vessels and learn about it. And they have a wonderful time. And one story that I have been told over and over again is one was a teacher group, and the teacher group. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think was even a high school group, and the teacher decided to climb into one of the four-person sub, one of the subs in the back, and couldn't get out. And she got in fine, but couldn't get out. And they were just having a great time. The kids were having a great time with that, and said best day of our year. So. And the other thing that we did, and I was on the committee for this, and it was a magical day for me, was the Maritime Family Fun Day. And it started with a teeny committee, and Jeremiah told us about what the Harbor Fest was like at the very, very beginning. And so we wanted to try and recreate or morph into today, but have that same type of feel where everybody was involved. And so we went out to several different businesses or nonprofits and say, we want to have this play day for families. It's going to be free. It's free to you. And the only charges were the food for the cost of the food vendors with Tognasini's and with the Women's Fishery and the Lions Club provided food, and that was the only cost. And it was amazing that people would come out, they set up their booth, the kids had a good time, and we celebrated, and everybody cleaned up, and we went home, and we all felt good. So, and that is scheduled again for this year, for the 10th, for the 14th. I wanted to mention that it is free. It has been free. The community helped build this museum. So the board at the time decided this will be open, free to the public. It is memberships. The memberships, there was a charter a campaign. There was the dollars that came in from the San Salvador before. And those two things helped build that building debt-free. And their business partnerships, and there's the Memorial Brick and Bench program, and then, of course, anything that the volunteers and the board of directors do, both financially as well as their time, which is as valuable as any dollar can be. These are just some more of the things and that we also do and go out and talk about the museum. But I also wanted to mention that we're in final negotiations with the city on expanding our footprint, having a lease. And we are not at the point yet where we can tell you what the footprint is going to look like. That is something that the board will get together after San Salvador and decide, what is it that is going to happen during that expansion time, and where is it going to go, and how, and so forth. So you can have somebody else come back and explain that someday. And I also wanted to mention the San Salvador. When we mentioned it, we went to a chamber mixer, and the chamber mixer was at the David Rogers Gallery. The president, Bonnie Jones, and I happened to just be looking around, and we saw that this man was this world-renowned watercolorist, and we told him about the San Salvador coming in, and he said, send me a few pictures, I'd like to do a watercolor of it. And so he created this. It's hanging in his gallery right now, and there will be signed named prints that will be on sale that will also help benefit the museum. And being in the news, we're constantly in the news because good things keep happening there, and we have Estero Bay News that is very generous in giving us time. But the latest one was we were just mentioned as one of the 5 top places in August to drive to in the AAA magazine, Westways magazine, that just came out. And finally, I want to thank you, and any questions, and as I said, any questions about the docking and how that's going to happen, or anything else at the museum about the vessels, the gentleman that I serve with can help.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Judy. That was a super presentation.
Thank you,
for
Jeremiah.
putting together all your photos there. It was really terrific. The bell in the front, I'm really sorry. The name of the boat is on the bell, and I don't have it.
Is that the Hondo? Is that from the Hondo project?
So the bell came off one of the destroyers.
Okay.
What's that? The hood. The hood? Oh, shh.
Somebody calling in with a name.
All right. So anyway, the bell was from one of the destroyers that were lost down at Hondo, which was one of the biggest naval losses of American history. Mm-hmm. And then also, I just wanted to add that the Alma is also a famous, very famous war hero, and participated in the rescue of 36 men that were sunk on Montebello. And a lot of the things people don't remember on that is when the Alma set out to recover these men, it is no question that that submarine was probably still lurking in the area. And so those guys set out to recover these people, knowing that there was a darn good chance that they were going to perish also. So Judy, thank you. It was
And
super.
no casualties because the Alma was there to save them.
No losses whatsoever.
Yes.
Right, thank you. It's a great job. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
I'll just add for clarification, 2 weeks and 2 days after Pearl Harbor, a 350-foot Japanese submarine sunk a 460-foot oil tanker, arguably 15 miles from here, from where we sit. That is the rescue that we're talking about with the tugboat, or line tug. It was, there were a series of incidences on the West Coast, 18 at least, of Japanese interaction. The Montebello may have been the only large vessel sunk. There were also incendiaries and various things the Japanese tried to accomplish and failed. World War II was in our backyard, and Alma helped.
I might also add that I've been told that now that we have the back patio area, we have so much crammed into the tiny little museum that we have, that there are people now with artifacts that are starting to come out of the woodwork and say, we believe that you're here now and you're going to stay now, and we'd like to share our artifacts with you. So don't let too much time pass you by before you go back over and over again. It's free admission, and see what new is happening at the Maritime Museum. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Mary, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I had a question whether the Abalone movie showing was revenue generating, and if so, whether you were considering, given the others had been sold out, of doing it again. And full disclosure, asking as someone who purchased tickets but couldn't go.
I heard there were lines out the door that didn't make it. Right now, we don't have a plan to show it again at the Bay Theater. That who knows how, who's going to buy it too, I guess now. But that certainly can be something that would be considered. And soon after the San Salvador plans to go, our board has voted to have a strategic planning program for among us and try and decide some of those things, what our next future is going to look like. In the meantime, we have an amazing bookstore with lots of historical books, including about the Montebello and that incident, and so many different books that are maritime books. But also the video is available, and it is definitely generating some income that way. So you can see it, it's on a DVD, and you can see it at home or however you see your DVDs.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Judy? All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. All right, with that, we'd like to go ahead and move to public comment, and that's for anybody that wants to do a presentation or discussion that can't stay for the full agenda.
Well, I'm back again.
Hi, Chuck.
Thank you. And I want to thank Ted for my very informative conversation before the meeting. I'm not going to say much about the boatyard. I sent you guys all things that showed boatyards up and down, or not storage yards up and down the coast. And I don't know if anybody has any questions about those that I could briefly answer.
I was able to look at it. One of the challenges we have is that I think as Ted said, it is city property.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you to take it to the next step and to go to city council.
Okay.
And they would like to hear that. I mean, we can do some recommendations, but, we're at the pleasure of the city council.
Yeah, I've come to understand that. So,
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and I put it in a separate email about us needing a small shipyard because I've been on the waiting list at Port San Luis now for almost a year, be a year in September, and I talked with the people there at length a week or so ago, and they're telling me they are so swamped with work that it's going to be maybe another year before I might get to haul my boat out. And part of that is because of their facility and how hard it is for them to launch and haul boats, depending on tide and surge and everything. And I also understand they have to give preference to the commercial fishermen, and I agree with that. I don't have a problem with that. And I think, you know, we need one here. I don't know just how to try and get that to come about unless I go out and talk to some of the people that run those and see if they have any interest in what would work here. Probably would have to be with a hydraulic trailer, and the only shipyard I know on the West Coast that uses that is up at Napa. And they use them up there. They're using, I think, 40 or 50-ton trailers made by Brownells. And, you know, they take it off of a launch ramp, not much different from the one that we've got here. So anyway, that's all I've got to say.
All right, thank you, Chuck, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to present here in the audience? AGP, do we have anybody on the line that would like to participate in the public comment?
Thank you, Chair Myers. There are currently no raised hands in the queue.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Got a little bit of echo. Next up is the consent calendar. I don't know if anybody wants to pull or discuss any of the harbor status report. No? All right, with that, we'll go ahead and receive and file that. Next up is business item B1. The harbor director will give a...
Chair Myers, we need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
All right, thank you. We'll do a roll call vote to approve item A1. Witowski, do we just all say aye, or do we have to call?
Could someone move to approve?
Oh, thanks.
I'll move to approve the consent.
I'll second it.
A simple aye. All approve, say aye. 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 Any nays?
Your motion passes.
Thanks. That's a little bit faster. I still like Lori saying everybody's name, but with that, we'll move on to business item B1. The harbor director will give a departmental updates.
Thank you, Chair Myers and board members. I'll start off with offshore wind. That's continuing to occur in the harbor, I would say. We're continuing to host consultant firms that are wanting information about the harbor, participating in webinars. We've been trying to stay on top of the Morro Bay Commercial Fishers Organization and their issues. We are continuing to look at potential grant opportunities as it relates to offshore wind, responding to media inquiries, and we are just beginning to hear from consultants that are looking into survey vessels in the area. The harbor will be preparing a fairly detailed report for the City Council. Whether it'll be the next meeting or the meeting thereafter, I'm not certain yet, but we'll be reporting a lot more details, and I'd be happy to provide that information to the committee members also. The harbor dredge completed June 7th with a total dredged amount of 195,000 cubic yards. I hear that's about average, maybe on a little bit on the high side. Just a little update on the dredge next year. I had indicated to you that the harbor had received $14.5 million. That has been approved by the Senate and the House, still needs to be signed into the budget. For next year, we don't anticipate any issues with that. But I did learn from the Army Corps that steelhead trout were found and that there's more mitigation that needs to be done before they can receive an approval for that permit for next year. They're telling me that it's probably unlikely that they'll be able to do the complete dredge next year. It'll be your typical harbor inlet and the Navy Channel. Those funds remain with the harbor. or at least with the Army Corps, and should be available the following year to do the complete dredge. So a little disappointing, but it is going to happen. I want to just give you some brief updates on our budget and revenue. The city goes through a process every year with a company called HDL, who looks back at data in terms of sales data. They track that for the state and for the city. And the city is now projecting approximate 2% revenue increase during this year. But unfortunately, a 4.5% expense increase. So that's not a good track to be on. Hopefully, that's not going to continue for the next several years. If it does, the harbor budget will turn upside down within a few years. We also expect to receive a report on the impact of Ironman to the economy. Not exactly certain when that's going to be produced, but I understand it should happen sometime this year, and we'll have some report to be able to provide to you. And then HDL provided a more detailed summary of the first quarter sales activity on the Embarcadero. And unfortunately, that is fairly down over last year's first quarter. So that was a terrible period of rain and storms. We all know that. Hopefully that was the impact, and it's not something more serious, but we'll be looking at the second quarter to see if that trend is continuing. I'd like to talk about some of the infrastructure projects, just keep you up to date on the DBW grant for the boat ramp replacement. Still on track to apply February 2023. DBW continues to move the goalposts on their application, so they're having us continue to jump through new hoops that come up every time we talk with them. The T-Pier, we have signed a contract with Brady and Associates to do an assessment of the T-Pier. That is something that needs to be done in order for us to release the $1.5 million that was granted by HUD for improvements to T-Pier. See what else here. Emergency dock repairs that we did back in the second quarter, they were completed. And I'll be talking a little bit later about the request to do some more repairs of the commercial fishing docks. Our insurance claim for the damage during the January and March storms, that's still in progress, still working with FEMA regarding reimbursement for some of the damage. Quite honestly, that's a multi-year process, but we're meeting with them. I believe it's at least on a monthly basis and updating them. The harbor office, if you haven't been there, we've been doing some internal remodeling. It's about 90% complete. If you would like to, put it on your calendar, August 16th. We'll make certain we get an invitation out. We are going to have an open house between 9 and 3, and you can show up anytime. We'd love to show you the improvements that we've made. Regarding paid parking, it's still my understanding, and I continue to hear from council, that they want to see that relooked at this year. So I'm anticipating that it is going to come back to life. As you know, we're waiting on a new city manager to join the city. That happens in a couple of weeks. It's going to take her a few months, I think, to get up to speed on everything, and she'll determine, when that comes back. And an update on just some leaseholder relations. Of course, Lori is heavily involved in a lot of these herself, and she's a support to me as I forge through some of these. And I'll just give you a list of names that we've been dealing with. I can't go into detail. Some are still in closed session negotiations. But we've worked with Windows, TLC Enterprises, Morro Bay Paddle Sports, Cal Poly, Morro Bay Commercial Fishers Organization, Libertine, Kickers, Giovanni's, Three Stacks, Bayfront Marina, State Parks Marina. And as you probably are aware, we put out an RFP for sites 49, 50, and 51. So we're continuing to work through those. There's still several that we need to get behind us, I should say. And then I appreciate Chuck's comments on the shipyard, because I continue to mention, we acknowledge it's absolutely a much-needed addition to the harbor, as well as boat storage. And as you know, that we have issues with that until we can deal with those. And then just some other miscellaneous items. We had outdrives that were failing on our 68. Those were replaced this year, so that vessel is back in operation. So the 64, 68, and 69 are all in service at this point. 69, which is the newest boat, right, will be going in for their fire suppression system and getting that up and running. So that'll happen as soon as summer is over. And if you haven't seen or heard, the Marshall sale of the Windwalker took place a couple of weeks ago. That was sold, and surprising to all of us, the buyer got the engines running and plans to motor out of the harbor in a couple of days. So, and he plans to rebuild that vessel and bring it back to life. So it'll be an interesting, he claims he'll have a YouTube channel that we can all watch on that. We did hire our part-time office position. So Beth, who was with us as a contract employee, I think about a year ago, rejoined us, and she's been able to kind of pick up where she's left off and is doing a great job there. And then I know we're going to be talking about some ad hoc committee requests, so I'll wait till we get to that. But I'm glad to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a few, but I'll open it up.
Yeah, I have 3 questions. I'd like to, if we can, just take them individually to stay focused. The first question I had was regarding like potential negotiations of accommodations from the offshore winds. Do we have a consultant, or are we starting to just kind of ensure that our needs are being met with the introduction of this industry to the city?
Could you clarify that?
Is the Harbor Department working with any sort of consultant to ensure that we are kind of, I guess, getting a good deal out of the introduction of the offshore wind and kind of lobbying to have them help support our needs?
And that's an excellent question. What I will say is the Harbor Department and the city is not in any negotiations regarding any offshore wind. At this point, we are strictly in a learning and observing what's happening. We're trying to absorb as much information as we can. I still think those discussions are potentially off a year, if not more. So there's no consultants that have been hired to support us. We've had many contact us who would love to do that. But at this point, we're strictly obtaining and absorbing information, and that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks. My second question was regarding the trout that were found. It seems unlikely to me that they would kind of disappear next year. Have we started thinking about kind of contingencies or what we would do if there continued to be the presence of trout and we're unable to get the permits?
Another good question. And I can't say that I can answer this 100%. I've had conversations with the Army Corps regarding this, and I asked a similar question, and the answer that I believe I got was, it's possible to trap and monitor. And so that would be their plan, would be to trap, tag them, and monitor during dredge and have to basically work around them.
All right, thanks. And then the first, or the last question I had was regarding the lease negotiations. I've heard feedback that some are worried about the council negotiating behind closed doors with leaseholders on long-term leases, and the lack of disclosures to the public about the proposed redevelopments. And I was wondering, just interested in your thoughts on kind of why the negotiations for redevelopments aren't happening in closed sessions, and how the public can kind of feel confident that everything is above board and the best decisions are being made for the city.
So state law allows for negotiations to be in closed session because if you are in negotiations with a complete open hand, it's very difficult to negotiate a fair settlement for the city or for the harbor. So those are protected, and it's the process that state, municipal, federal government will operate under anytime there's a negotiation for real estate. It's the same thing with lawsuits. Those are protected if there's a claim against the city. Those negotiations are going to be protected in closed session. And I believe also negotiations for unions are also. So those three items are generally handled under a closed session.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Member Mikowski. Any other questions? I have a couple. Nope. All right, I have four. You mentioned grants for the offshore wind. Just as an example, what would those grants entail?
So they haven't been very detailed at this point. There's a lot of money that is being discussed that could become available for issues like infrastructure. It could be for hardening infrastructure. It could be for piers. It could be for even structures on land. We really don't have anything that we've seen at this point that we could even apply for. Some of the money, from my understanding, will be available through Congress, earmarks, basically going to them,
Sure.
put your hands out, asking for money. So again, it's really too early to tell what's going to be available, but I mean, if you follow any of what's going on in the federal government, there's billions of dollars that are being tossed around and
Sure.
discussed, so we really don't.
I'm assuming that you've got your eye towards that $7 million or $10 million list of deferred maintenance around the harbor, the
Absolutely.
revetments, and
Sure.
okay. Next question. I'm going to jump to this other one. You mentioned that all the site negotiations and renegotiating leases and redevelopment. Do you foresee that having a positive impact on your revenue, 12 months from now?
If you look at all of the leases that are in place, I mean, many of the leases are long-term leases, so having any significant impact in the next year or two will be more dependent upon the developments that are coming, close to being completed.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
nothing that you foresee in the hopper that's going to be a big pop in revenue.
No.
Yeah, well, hers. TLC.
Yeah, we're hoping for
Okay.
that one, yeah.
Thank you. The three harbor patrol boats that you have now, once the last one gets its final sign off, when do you expect the last boat or the oldest boat to retire?
I will discuss that with Becca and staff to see where they feel. There's an initial discussion, I think, that it will come out of service at some point. We would possibly then look for a grant for something much smaller, possibly a rib, outboard type rib that could be used in the harbor, more nimble, easier to, side tie to vessels.
Okay. And then the last question, you mentioned about it's kind of a tie into what she was talking about, the trout. With the larger dredge, you said something that the money would still be available, so if it did get pushed back a year, we wouldn't lose access to that $14 million.
That's what the Army Corps has indicated. We don't lose the funding, it stays.
Although it may be more expensive then because of mitigation or inflation, hard to tell.
Right.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, sorry, I had one more. You mentioned the 4% increase in expenditures. Are you looking at proportionally, potentially increasing non-tidelands revenue generating items such as like liveaboards or other things you might have?
I can't say that we have looked specifically at raising any specific fees. All of those fees go up on an annual basis based on CPI, so they get continual increases. I do think it could be a potential area again where I may ask HAB to help us look at the market and see if there are some areas of opportunity.
All right, a question for you, Lori. Do we have to have a vote on close and file business items? Okay. All right, anything else on item B1? Any public comment? Audience? AGP, is there anybody on the line that has their hand up?
Thank you, Chair Myers. Just a moment. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Thank you, AGP. And with that, we'll move to item B2, updates from the consent of landlord ad hoc committee. Start with you, person that has.
Hello. Hi. So a few months ago, we put together an ad hoc committee for the consent of landowner evaluation for possible, I'll let Mary talk about it a little later. And we had board members Dowdy, Witkowski, and myself put on that. And it's about different developments or master leaseholders seeking to have a new lease or new development, and what happens if it gets tied up or if they do it even faster. So we comprised a group of individuals in our community that are respected leaders. We chose representatives from all of the facets, or I tried to include everyone that should be represented on this subject matter. A part of this ad hoc, we included a prior interim city manager, a master leaseholder, a couple of them, a couple developers, prior harbor director, subleasee, harbor advisory board liaison council member, HAB board members, 3 of us, like we said, as well as multiple different city staff. We began by researching different areas that are also Tidelands properties and seeing what they do in their development process and how they kept things on a good timeline, and what were the things that helped them achieve that, what the things that didn't help them achieve that. And we looked at our own lease policy and where we could either create our own or use some of the tactics that other Tidelands properties used. I also went out on the pavement and polled some current leaseholders, and the majority of them, their main concern was fairness across the board of all Tideland properties. So if one has incentive or penalty, then it would be across the board for all of them. So by all the recommendations that I'm going to have Mary discuss later, we came to terms that it would be within the lease policy disclosed to all developers or master leaseholders that wish to continue being Tidelands property leasees. And we came up with this. Mary, take it away.
Yeah, so in order to incentivize timely completion of construction milestones for the COL process, our working group proposed the following changes. The first is a penalty addition of a 1/30th of the monthly base rent for each day that the milestone is not met. The second is an incentive where if the applicant completes the milestones before the final timeline date, they receive a 0% on percentage until the milestone or projected project completion date. The third is introduction of an adjudication process regarding proposed timelines. This is because we believe the city and applicant had competing incentives with regards to the setting of the project timeline, and so we wanted to create a process to have a neutral dispute adjudication. The fourth was an inclusion of examples of reasons for timeline extensions so that the contract might be more easily understood by people going through the process. And the fifth was essentially updates to the 2 flow charts to include components of our proposal, such as setting, aligning, and then adjudicating timelines.
Are you guys going to do the other presentation, or do you wait for questions?
Yeah, we can take any questions.
Actually, we're going to put up the flow chart. First off, the new master leaseholder flow chart, which adds the tenant meets with harbor staff to discuss proposed new lease. And so it just adds one more layer of if it's yes, it moves down to the next level, and if it doesn't, if they can't come to terms with it, then a mediator would step in and adjudicate, and then possibly it would go back to the flow chart with a yes again. So it just allows that extra layer of understanding that they can have that path rather than just a stalemate. So the next one. And the next one is pretty much the same. It just is going to be within the lease policy that it shows what the situation would be if it's a current leaseholder that is doing improvements or redeveloping the same property, and it gives them the same opportunity to have a mediator adjudicate. Thank you. And so do we have any questions from other board members for either Mary or myself?
I've got a couple questions if nobody else does. On number 2, I understand, you want to reward people for being, getting things done early. I didn't understand the 0% on percentage.
Okay, so as far as leases go, you have a base rent, so you're always paying and the base rent is based on property taxes and what is market or close to market rate of what it is that they should be getting for that property because of the value of that dirt. And so they're always going to pay that, even when they're building. But if they are supposed to come up on January 1st and have a building and say that they finish by October 1st, it means that they only pay the base rent, and if they make more than base rent based on if their percentage rent is 3% for restaurants or 5% for retail or 5% for hotel, if they make over and above that base, then they don't have to pay it for that time. So it incentivizes them to finish earlier.
Okay, so the 0% means their rent's cheaper for some period of time, or could be less.
It could be. For a starting business, it could be the same. For an established business that is just merely redeveloping, it could be a major savings for them. But overall, it's very hard to get anything accomplished that quickly.
Yeah.
So hopefully the timeline is just right. And so if they did it, then they did something really right and they deserve it.
Okay. That's question 1. Question 2, the flow charts didn't make it into the agenda. So is that still a deliverable to I guess, let me actually rephrase that. We have this document here, the 2 flow charts. What's the next step for that? Maybe this is directed to Ted.
Yeah,
the harbor director.
we can ask Ted, because a lot of this is going to probably go to the city attorney, and so it's a recommendation at this point. I don't know if it's going to go to the attorney or straight to the city council, but I'd assume the attorney for language, and then the city council can do with it.
And first, I want to thank the committee. I mean, you really honed in on many inequities that were existing out there, and you came up with some very creative solutions. And I appreciate the amount of work that you did finding those solutions and coming up with something that I think is a much better process. But yeah, this will, basically what will happen is I will take this as a recommendation. I will need to prepare a document that will be reviewed by the city attorney, making certain that we meet all the requirements, and then likely, I believe, would go to council for their approval also. So I will, after we start that process, I will get back to the HAB and let you know kind of where we are with that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. There's one little sort of follow-up to that. So at this point, the ad hoc for the COL is done, more or less.
Correct.
So assuming that there's no pushback from the city attorney, it's kind of, you're done, thank you very much. Is that the expectation?
I believe so.
Just because it would have our stamp of approval on it, I know that you need to talk to the city attorney. I would like just one more look at what the thing is the document that's going to, that we can all get our yays and nays on it
Okay,
before
can do
it's
that.
sent out there.
Right.
Cool. I know it takes a little bit longer, but it's important if it turns out to be what we do recommend. We'd like to know. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any more questions on item B2? No? B3, Gene, I don't know if you want to recuse yourself for this?
Sit down.
Hey, Cal,
Yep.
did you open up public comment?
Oh, no, I did not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment on the consent of landowners business item in the audience? AGP, is there anybody on the phone?
Thank you, Chair Myers. There are currently no raised hands in the queue.
Thank you. All right, now on to item B3, commercial fishing dock. I guess this would be start with you.
Chair Myers, committee members, thank you again. So, one of the tasks I've been challenged with is to develop a financial plan for the harbor, long-term financial plan. And it's quite evident that that financial plan isn't something that's going to happen in a year. And the other piece of this is recognizing the amount of deferred maintenance and damage we have to our commercial fishing docks, to the point where some of them are just not usable. And if we continue down the path, they're not going to be usable. As you know, there was a lot of damage in the January storm and then the March storm. And so I'm looking for your recommendation that I take this forward to City Council for approval. And it's really an interim plan. I'm not going to read it out to you. I'm assuming you read through it. But the plan, I believe, will give us another 8 to 10 years of useful life, which is probably the minimum we need in order to not only develop a financial plan, but basically do a replacement of docks. And when that replacement comes, we're going to be spending millions of dollars at that time. So we have funds that have been approved, and I have some funds that need approval. The $200,000 is in our budget. The commercial fishers have granted $100,000 that I need to go to council for their approval to accept it. And then we have about $80,000 currently right now that has been set aside having to do with offshore wind a couple of years ago. That money is in an account, and I need to go to council to request that that be dispersed for this particular project. So my request is that you recommend I take this to council as an approved plan, and hopefully we get them to approve it. If that occurs, we'll go out to RFP, find a suitable contractor that can do the work, and hopefully get through all of the docks and at least provide enough repair to keep them in working order for a number of years. So I'll answer any questions.
Sure. Any questions to the harbor director? No? I've still got two. I'm full of questions. With using this money, is there any risk of depleting any of the reserves that the harbor department might have?
So this is not coming out of reserves. The $200,000 is in our operating budget. The $100,000 is a grant, and the $80,000 is also in a separate account. So nothing out of our reserves.
Okay. And then the second question, I know a number of years ago, I don't know, it's been a long time, the harbor department borrowed some money to do a major refit of one of the T-piers. I know it just got paid off a couple years back. Is there any appetite to borrow money to do a much larger refit?
I don't think we'd be prepared to repay a loan of that magnitude, to be
Okay,
honest.
fair enough. Just had to ask the question.
Yeah.
With that, I'd like to take a roll call vote to see if the Harbor Advisory Board would like to.
Need it first. Yeah.
We need a motion, and I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I don't
the
think
Harbor.
you can.
What's that?
You're the chair.
Oh, Okay, well, would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that the board approve the plan regarding the grant and Castle Wind.
I second.
All right, thank you. We'll do the ayes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what.
Could you repeat the?
What are we approving? Sorry.
We're approving the Castle Wind and the grant portion,
The
the monies for repairs.
The staff recommendation to support the commercial fishing dock repair plan.
Okay, that's it.
Okay. Was that including the grant from the commercial fishing industry? You said Castle Wind, right?
Castle Wind.
Yes, it's three things. It's using money from the harbor budget, the commercial fishing grant, and the Castle Wind funds.
Okay, I just heard Castle Wind, so it had me confused.
Gotcha. All right, so with that, we've got the first, the second, to do a roll call vote. Ayes. We'll just do ayes. Ayes?
Ayes.
Ayes.
Any nays? Nope, no nays. Passes, whatever the count is. Thank you, Lori.
Your motion passes.
Thanks. I did already do public comment. Did I do public comment? Oh, thanks, Gene. Come on back. Next up is item B4. It's coming up with a new ad hoc for commercial vessel fees. Back over to you,
Chair
Harbor
Myers.
Director.
So staff is requesting that the Harbor Advisory Board create an ad hoc committee to investigate how other harbors are charging for commercial vessels, slip fees, and use fees. So just as a little background, we're just preparing. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. One of the things that we recognize is we do not have a fee for commercial vessels, non-fishing commercial vessels. We have a fee for commercial fishing vessels, and we have fees for recreational vessels. But if a survey vessel shows up at our dock or another type of commercial vessel shows up at our dock, we do not have a separate fee for that. So we'd be looking for some guidance as to how other harbors and mainly ports handle those fees and handle whether it's docking fees, whether it's use fees, some guidance on your recommendation in that area.
Any questions on that?
I noticed B4 and B5, taking them together, it's the same inquiry. In other words, if you're talking to a harbor director, the committee might combine those two instead of having two committees. I was just curious how you felt about that.
Yeah, and we, had some initial discussion on that. It seemed like and you're right, you might be talking to the same organizations, but on different topics. It seemed like a better plan to separate those. I think they're different issues, but you're right, you might be talking to the same person, which could be helpful if you have two different committee groups and you make contact and you know who to talk to. But my recommendation would be to keep the liability separate from the commercial fees.
So do you have an example of what you've charged them? What is your tactic right now?
I'm sorry, what is?
If somebody does come in, what do you guys charge
I
right now?
believe
Do you do by foot? Is it?
I believe it's by foot for the commercial fish. That's how we would charge, right? The commercial fishing vessel charge, which is pretty low because, we encourage the commercial fishing, and it's recreational is a higher fee.
Yeah, we have a recreational fee and we have a commercial fee. Commercial is normally fishing, is what we've always had it as. We don't have another fee for that other commercial.
So I guess you're looking, or the harbor will be looking to establish a third alternate fee for a commercial workboat.
Right.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. And there could, again, I think harbors can do it different ways. I wasn't familiar with different ways in Oceanside either, but I know ports could have a lot of different charges. It could be use of the pier. There could be other reasons to have different fees. And we just, again, would like your direction and help in kind of supporting that.
Yes, a little bit of history here. Years ago, there was a company, I believe it was a dredge company, who did some work in the bay, and then they left their barge and dredge out on their own mooring. And it went on and on and on because it was cheaper for them to leave it here than somewhere else.
Right.
And so at the time, all we had was like a per foot fee, and it was cheap for them. So since then, we've put an exponential fee. There more than 30 days, it doubled, and then 60 days, it quadrupled, so that they didn't use this as a storage yard. So I would be hesitant to just let anybody just come in here and leave a boat just to sit here.
Of course, then that brings us to upcoming activities that we'll be experiencing, such as wind activity and seismic work and so forth that would be happening in conjunction with that. So they will be probably using it long-term. So that would be the fee probably then that needs to be established. And
I mean, right now,
I don't know how other ports
Yeah,
do it
and
first.
I don't either, to be honest with you. That's why we really need some help in figuring out something that's fair to the harbor, compensates, for the use. I mean, just because a vessel is tied up at the dock, if you're loading or unloading equipment, there's certainly, potential damage or certainly deterioration of the wharf. There's lots of issues we need to think about. Utilities that could be used during that process, parking. Again, we don't know. We want to be fair to ourselves when.
Would Santa Barbara be a fair port to, I know they have a lot of research that goes on down there, and
I think we'd be curious as to the major ports also. What is Long Beach? What is San Diego? What is San Francisco? What are they doing? Because commercial activity could be everything from a survey vessel to something greater, and we just want to be ready with fees if we need to charge.
I might say that I think the proposed ad hoc committee goal could be expanded on. I think one of the reasons why the COL ad hoc committee was successful from my perspective is because we received kind of like a stated goal, which was to encourage timely completion of milestones. And so instead of having the scope of the ad hoc committee as just kind of investigating how other harbors charge for this, I think you might get more out of the time if you gave the task of like, how might Morro Bay structure vessel slip fees in order to prepare for our future or something like that? That just is a goal, and the delivery could say, given the traffic that we expect to have and our current slip number of people in available slips, I'm on the right term, this is what we think that you should do. But I think without knowing exactly what your goals are, and without coming forward with a recommendation, it might be hard for us to bring something useful back from an investigation that really answers the question you're trying to answer if we don't really know what the question is.
Well, an ad hoc would be created by motion and vote. I mean, you could make a motion being more specific. I'm open to suggestions again, because all in my mind I can think of is how are we going to be ready to charge for commercial vessel activity? And again, it's not my background, but.
So I might suggest that we form an ad hoc committee with the goal of putting forward a proposal on how Morro Bay should structure vessel slip fees in order to support and encourage the, activity that we want.
To look at not just commercial fees, but potentially even the other fees that are charged. Look at the whole
Yeah, one example of that is we want to continue to encourage commercial fishing. So we don't want to raise those fees. We think we're going to have increased traffic of other commercial, industrial things who might be able to tolerate a higher fee. So we want to institute, like, those might be example recommendations that we come back with.
Yeah, maybe the people that have the boats that aren't navigable, that are tied up out there, does it make sense to have, those boats still sitting there and they could put into, a more, big, higher fee structure by getting used somewhere else? Brainstorming, you had a comment, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I just keep hearing commercial fees, and we want, as I was to understand it, this was a segment of the commercial industry, not the
fishermen.
fishing industry. This is a segment that we'll be dealing with in the research and construction part of the industry. So I believe that's the fees we're looking for that type of boat. We have the other fees established, right? And so it's
Well, I guess that
we
was
don't we don't have fees established for these working boats currently. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Not to do with commercial fishing.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, in reading this, an ad hoc committee to investigate how other harbors charge. That's what we're being asked to do. So I would suggest we form an ad hoc committee, get on the computer, get on the, as they say in Boston, the blower, and do a little research. We're being asked to do some research. So I would make a motion that we form an ad hoc committee to do that research on B4 without combining it to B5.
And I would recommend that instead of just investigating, we come with a proposal on how that takes our investigation and then puts it with what we know is going to happen here in Morro Bay and bring forward actual recommendations on how to charge for non-fishing commercial vessel slip fees. It increases, I think, the scope from just a investigation of how other people do it to bringing forward a recommendation to TED on how we think we should do it.
I'm sorry, yeah, and that's exactly what I am looking for, is not just what are others doing, but how do you recommend? So I think you're saying the same almost, yeah.
And also bearing in mind that this type of thing hasn't been done here. We've had naturally construction and other construction vessels, but this is going to be something of a different sort. The wind is not something the West Coast has experienced before, the wind energy platforms. So, okay.
So I guess, and help me out here, Lori, do we want to say that we want to have a committee and then ask for volunteers, or do we just ask for volunteers at the same time? All right, so with all this discussion, do we have people that would like to participate in this ad hoc? We can have up to 3.
I would like to participate. I'll be leaving here at the end of the month, the beginning of September, for 2 months. So
You're probably not the best candidate then. I don't know, Mary or Jean, Chris?
I think you need, well, you don't need 3, but
Yeah.
you can do 2.
You could start with 3 and then have Jeremiah drop off when he needs
Sure, start off with 2. I'm more than interested. I don't know, Chris, are you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, we got Chris and Mary, and then,
okay.
and you'll start and make sure they don't
I'd like to do that. Thank you.
pop it out, all right? So I guess we'll make a motion then. Did the one that Chris say was okay, or do we have to restate it?
I would have Chris resend. and
Okay.
then
Want to make
start
another
a new
motion,
one.
Chris?
No.
Thank you.
Let's see. I would make a motion that we form an ad hoc committee to investigate how other harbors charge and therefore make recommendations out of that information.
I second.
All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye.
And I'm sorry, who were the committee members that have?
These two, Chris and, these three.
Jeremiah,
Oh, yeah.
are you on it?
No.
Chris Vale, Mary. Councilman.
Got it.
Jeremiah.
Thank you.
You're the only Mary here.
Yep. Member Wachowski. All right, public comment. Any public comment on the ad hoc for the commercial fees, vessel fees? AGP, any public comment?
Thank you, Chair Myers. There are currently no raised hands in the queue.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and move to B5, which is the liability, harbor liability topic.
Yeah, so this has been concerning me since I've joined Morro Bay, and that's some of the liability that we potentially face for different reasons.
Huge.
Yeah. So a few of them that come to mind, and I know these are sensitive to the community, and I want to be sensitive to the fact that they are sensitive to the community, but it's still something that the harbor needs to look at. It's my number one responsibility is safety in the harbor. And so some of those that I've seen have to do with swimming in the bay and channel, at a minimum across the channel, jumping off the pier, and then also, excuse me, having adequate insurance for vessels. Liability, not comprehensive, but basically liability insurance, which in California provides a minimum of $1 million pollution liability. And that's a big one for the harbor to know that every vessel has that in case there is an issue. So we'd be looking for an ad hoc committee to look into those issues and make a recommendation.
This committee, these changes would potentially impact the municipal code for harbor?
Correct.
Or Morro Bay, rather?
Right.
Is the liability insurance, would that include make any changes to like the leasing arrangements for the like the liveaboards, the commercial vessels, the recreational boats?
Yeah, the insurance requirements I don't think would be a code requirement. It would probably be more administrative that the city attorney would help us develop into the permit. We use permits? Is that what you're calling them, Lori? Yeah, the permit as a requirement.
And any of the code changes, I mean, that's like public behavior, jumping off the pier.
That, quite honestly, could end up in code, I think, to strengthen it. May or may not. Depends how the city attorney would view that.
Okay. Be more of working with Chris, the city attorney, than,
Right.
okay. I'm sorry, Jeremiah.
Ted, are you advocating that every recreational boat have a insurance policy?
That's what I would like for the ad hoc committee to review how other harbors are doing it. In my past experience, if a harbor has an insurance requirement, every vessel has insurance.
So every boat that launches in the harbor needs to have?
Not launches, no. Anyone who has a permit with the harbor, whether it's on a mooring or whether it's in a slip.
Would that also include like any end of life, especially like the boats that you have to drag up out of their sink or whatever?
Well, it could almost
So,
be especially them.
So, yeah, and that's always a big question, of course. But it's always a big question, it's always a sticky question. The reason is many boats are not insurable.
Yes, you're right. But liability is a different issue than comprehensive. So liability, typically you can get, there could be some that maybe from a pollution standpoint, nobody wants to touch it, but.
Yeah, and as far as the pollution, I don't know how that works. I've had the insurance, but our insurance company, I belong to an insurance pool, and we owned the pool, or the company, and a couple of them, as a matter of fact, and our pollution insurance came from a separate, it was a rider on our own policy, and it came from a separate entity. I don't know why.
Right.
But there's apparently people who specialize in that type of insurance.
Right. But it's my understanding in California, vessel insurance will have a minimum pollution liability coverage.
Is there any possibility that the lack of insurance would cause that vessel to no longer be moored here?
I mean, again,
Here's an
that's a
awkward question.
process.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been through that process. I've been through the process of increasing that rate. And typically, there's a time frame given to get compliance because it takes time to go through that entire process. And again, it depends where you start. You know, do you start at 50,000, 100,000, 300,000? Each one creates higher cost, and some companies will only do certain policies. And again, I would like to know how more of the Central Coast handles this. Are harbors requiring it? Is it something that you can't moor there unless you have insurance? Some harbors require it on transient vessels also.
So yeah, see what the pier harbors are doing, and
Well, we kind of know. Your point is well taken. Most commercial marinas require that their tenants carry insurance and also co-insure the marina itself.
Right.
The municipal harbors are somewhat the same. Santa Cruz, Santa Barbara, I believe, have the same format. That if there is any good news in this, you can usually get it on a phone call added to your homeowner's policy even. You don't necessarily have to go out and insure the boat, hull insurance. So there are various ways around it. And it's going to hurt to people who have boats in this harbor that are, no, not necessarily liveaboards, but that are in some form or other derelict that can't, in anybody's right mind, get insurance. But unfortunately, it's a cruel reality that some might say we shouldn't have those boats here anyway. And we always have.
there any other questions or comments? All right, so now we'll look for volunteers. Is there anybody that's interested in this particular topic? I know I am. Anybody else?
I'll do it.
All right, I got two. It's good enough. All right, so Chris, you're my motion guy tonight.
Was it Gene that said yes? Okay. And Val? Okay.
I move that we form an ad hoc committee to investigate how other harbors handle insurance requirements, and additionally, how other harbors handle swimming in their channels and bays off piers.
I guess I'll second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Here.
Here. Okay, I guess that passed.
I'm thinking of a sign I saw one time of a bridge, and the signs said, no overhead casting, no jumping from the bridge, and no laughing. Yes, these are the things you can't do on that bridge. We're getting there.
I think that's the last of our agenda items. Ted, I wanted to ask one question for you. We had several other ad hocs that we had done for quite some time that were left over from the last harbor director. Do we need to do anything formally to sort of disband those?
Oh, public comment again.
Public comment. Hi, is there anybody in the audience that has a public comment on the item, business item B5, the harbor liability ad hoc? Is there anybody, AGP, is there anybody on the phone that would like to make a public comment?
Thank you, Chair Myers. There is currently no raised hands in the queue.
All right, thank you. Go back to do we want any formality about closing the other ad hocs, the budget, parking, and
I mean, I don't know if there's a formal process necessary to do that.
Okay,
Well,
so,
it sounds a little bit like parking might come back.
yeah, but if parking were to come back, it would be another business item like we have, and we
Correct.
discuss it and
Right.
reform. May or may not be the same people. All right, comments on that?
I'll sign up to find out what the right answer is.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's a declaration of a future agenda item. Is there any other future agenda items that people would like to add? All right, well, meeting is,
I'm interested in receiving an update on the kayak permitting program that we had provided feedback, I think, 4 meetings ago, and I thought we were going to get the update in this meeting, but would like to just continue to ask for that and see if we can get an update.
all right, thank you. Any other future agenda items? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you, audience. Thank you, folks on the call.